During Sunday dinner at my place, my billionaire son set down his fork and asked, "Dad, why haven't you moved into the lake house yet? It's been almost a year." I felt my stomach drop somewhere around my knees. "What lake house? I've never owned a lake house." His eyes slid across the table to my daughter. She went the color of skim milk, knocked over her water glass reaching for her purse, and was out my front door before I could stand up. Before we go any further, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel, and tell me down in the comments what time it is wherever you're sitting right now. I've been making pot roast since noon, same recipe my late wife used, the one with the parsnips she always insisted on, even though I hated parsnips for 30 years and pretended to love them for 30 more. The kitchen in my apartment isn't much. Galley style, one window over the sink that looks out at the parking lot of a Walgreens. But I'd lit candles. Real candles, not the battery kind. My boy was driving down from Bellevue and I hadn't laid eyes on him in 14 months. I'm 67 years old. I worked 38 years as a special effects technician in the film industry. Practical effects, mostly. The kind of stuff they don't really do anymore. I built rain rigs for a Tom Hanks picture in '98. I rigged a chandelier to fall on cue for a Spielberg production in 2003. I made a man look like he was on fire without actually setting him on fire, which was harder than it sounds. I retired 4 years ago when my hands started shaking too much for the precision work. Now I live on Social Security and a small union pension in a one-bedroom in Tacoma, and I considered myself a contented man. Right up until that Sunday in October. My son's name is Brennan. He's 39. He runs a biotech company in Seattle that makes synthetic skin grafts for burn victims. He's worth somewhere north of $400 million on paper, though you wouldn't know it from looking at him. He still wears the same gray hoodies he wore in college. My daughter is Lorraine. She's 35, 2 years out from a divorce that left her raising my granddaughter alone, working as a paralegal at a firm downtown. Her new husband, the one she'd been with about 2 years by then, is named Spencer. Spencer Halleck, 41 years old, supposedly some kind of finance consultant. The type of man who orders bourbon neat and then sips it like medicine. Brennan came through the door first, ducking like he always does, even though my doorways aren't low. He set down a bottle of wine on my kitchen counter that I later looked up on Lime and just about choked. $600 for a single bottle of red. He hugged me so hard my back popped, which was a relief because it had been bothering me. Lorraine showed up about 20 minutes later with Spencer trailing behind her, and right away I could tell something was off. She was wearing a sweatshirt and jeans, no jewelry, hair pulled back in a ponytail. Now my daughter, before all this, was the kind of woman who put on lipstick to take out the trash. Spencer kissed my cheek, which I never liked from him, and went straight to the bathroom without saying hello. We sat down. The pot roast was good, if I do say so. Burnham was telling us about a clinical trial that had just gotten approved, something about regenerating skin for diabetic ulcers. He was animated, hands moving. Lorraine kept asking little questions to keep him talking, which I noticed because she usually does the opposite, usually steers the conversation back to herself. Spencer mostly stared at his plate and pushed parsnips around with his fork. Then Brennan put down his silverware and asked the question, "Dad, why haven't you moved into the lake house yet? It's been almost a year." I'd been raising a fork full of meat to my mouth. I lowered it slowly, like the fork was suddenly very heavy. "What lake house? I've never owned a lake house." Brennan blinked at me. Then he turned his head, slow, the way you do when you're starting to understand something you don't want to understand, and he looked at his sister. "The one on Lake Sammamish," he said. "I sent Lorraine $920,000 in November of last year. The wire was specifically tagged Dad's retirement house. She was supposed to handle the closing because I was traveling for the Series C raise. She told me everything went through. She showed me a picture of you on the dock. I had not been on a dock since 1994. Lorraine stood up so fast her chair tipped over backward. The crash was louder than it had any right to be in that small kitchen. Her hand hit her water glass and the whole thing came down across her plate, water going everywhere, and she grabbed her purse off the back of the chair so hard that the strap broke. The bag fell. Half the contents came out. A wallet, a tube of chapstick, an inhaler, and a single key on a plain steel ring with a paper tag attached. The kind real estate agents put on keys at closing. She didn't even try to pick them up. She just looked at me with her whole face going to pieces and said, "I have to go. I have to go right now." And Spencer was already on his feet, taking her by the elbow, and the two of them were out the door before I'd fully registered what was happening. The door didn't slam so much as it clicked shut, which was somehow worse. I sat at my kitchen table looking at the contents of my daughter's purse on the linoleum floor. The candles were still burning. The pot roast was still steaming. My son was breathing through his nose like he was trying not to throw up. I bent down and picked up the key. The tag had an address printed on it, 23847 East Lakeshore Drive, Sammamish. And below that, in handwriting I'd recognize anywhere, because I'd taught her to make those loops on her G's when she was 8 years old, my daughter had written, "Closing no 14. Brennan and I didn't sleep. We sat at that kitchen table until almost 4 in the morning. He had his laptop out, pulling up bank statements, wire transfer records, an email thread between him and Lorraine going back 2 years. The wire had been sent on November 8th of the previous year, $920,000. The memo line read, plain as day, Dad House, Purchase, LK Sammamish. She'd received the money on the 9th. She'd sent him a fake closing photo on the 14th. I looked at the photo. It was me, all right. From a fishing trip in 1994, she'd cropped me out of the original and pasted me in front of a stock photo of a lake house. The Photoshop work was bad. You could see the edge where my shoulder met the fake background, the lighting all wrong. My boy had looked at this picture and seen what he wanted to see. His old man finally living somewhere nice. Around 2 in the morning, Brennan got quiet. He'd been pacing. He sat back down across from me and rubbed his face with both hands. "Dad, I have to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did you know about this? Are you and Lorraine in this together? Some kind of arrangement?" I didn't get angry. I understood why he asked. I just looked at him and said, "Son, I've been living in this apartment for 11 years. I've never been to Lake Sammamish. I didn't know that money existed." And he believed me, because what he'd seen on his sister's face when she ran out the door was guilt so big it knocked her chair over. The next morning I drove to Sammamish. I'd never been out there. It's a wealthy area east of Seattle, the kind of place where the houses have boat lifts and the driveways have heated stones, so the snow melts on its own. I drove my old Ford Ranger out the 90 East with the windows down because the heater had been broken for 2 years and I'd never gotten around to fixing it. I took the exit and followed the GPS down a winding road that hugged the lake. The houses got bigger. The gates got fancier. The trees got older. 23847 East Lakeshore Drive was a glass and cedar thing set back from the road behind a gate that wasn't locked. I drove up the driveway with my heart doing something it shouldn't have been doing at 67, parked at the top of the circular drive, and got out. The house was huge. I'm guessing 6,000 square feet. A wraparound deck on the lakeside. A 2-slip boathouse. The kind of place where the realtor's listing would say, "Your private waterfront sanctuary," and mean it. I cupped my hands and looked through the window beside the front door. Empty. Completely, totally empty. Bare hardwood floors. Not so much as a coffee table. Not a curtain on a single window. A house where nobody lived and never had. I was standing on the porch trying to figure out what to feel when a voice behind me said, "You looking a buy?" I turned around. There was an old man down at the property line in a mariner's cap, standing at the edge of his driveway with a leaf blower idling at his feet. Maybe 75. I waved. "Just looking." "The owners aren't around?" He shook his head. "Nobody's been around." He shook his head. "Nobody's been around?" They closed on this place last fall. November, I think. I've been here 41 years. I noticed things. A young couple did the walkthrough. Not even a moving truck. Places just sat empty. The husband, he came by once or twice in the spring to check the gate. Big fella, Kinda looked like a banker. Heavy set, always on his phone. He squinted at me. You family? Something like that, I said. I sat in my truck for a long time after that in the driveway of the empty house my son had bought for me, looking at the lake. The water was that flat steel color it gets in October. There was a heron standing on a piling out by the boathouse. I thought about getting out and walking down to the dock, but I didn't. It wasn't my house. I drove home. That afternoon, Brennan called me from his office. He'd had his assistant pull every financial record he could get a legal hand on for Lorraine and Spencer Halleck. The picture wasn't pretty. They were drowning. $340,000 in credit card debt across 9 different cards, all maxed. 2 personal loans totaling $80,000. A second mortgage on their house in Renton that had eaten up their equity. And here was the kicker, Brennan said. Spencer hadn't worked in over a year. Whatever consulting business he claimed to run had been dissolved as a business entity in February of the previous year. Lorraine's paralegal salary, $68,000 a year, was the only legitimate income coming into that household. They needed money, Dad, Brennan said. Bad. But none of this explains why she'd buy a house and let it sit empty. If they needed cash, they could have just kept the wire and pretended to buy a house. Why actually purchase one? I didn't have an answer for him. That night, alone at my kitchen table, I tried to remember the last time my daughter had been honest with me about something hard. Her divorce, she'd lied about for almost a year before telling me. Her drinking, in her late 20s, she'd lied about that too. There was a pattern, if I was willing to look at it. Lorraine was the kind of person who handled bad news by hiding it until the hiding became the bigger problem. She was her mother's daughter that way. My wife had hidden the breast cancer from me for 4 months. 4 months. Until she couldn't hide it anymore. I'd been so angry with her. And then she died. And I spent the next 11 years wishing I hadn't been angry. I thought about that, and then I did something stupid. I sent Lorraine a text. Just one. Don't bother explaining unless you're going to tell me the whole truth. She responded within 60 seconds. Dad, please, can we meet? Just you, please. I did not respond. Let her wait. Let her sit in it the way she'd let me sit in this for a year. Then I called my old friend Myrell. Myrell and I worked together for 26 years. She was a prop master, then a production designer. Then she went into commercial real estate after she got tired of the film industry's nonsense. She's 70 now, lives in West Seattle, drinks martinis like they're water, and somehow stays sharper than people half her age. I didn't tell her on the phone what I needed. I just asked her to meet me for breakfast at a diner she likes in Burien. I told her the whole story over eggs and bacon. She listened without interrupting once, which is unusual for her. When I finished, she set down her coffee cup, very carefully, and said, Honey, you want my honest opinion? Always. Your daughter stole nearly $1 million from your son and used it to buy a house she's never lived in. That's not a financial crisis. That's something else. That's not even revenge against you, which I'd half understand. Empty houses are bought for one of 2 reasons. Either somebody's hiding money in real estate, or somebody's planning to hide a person. I asked her what she meant. Spencer, she said. What do you actually know about him? I had to admit I didn't know much. He'd appeared in Lorraine's life about 3 years ago, charming enough at first, but I'd never warmed to him. He came from money, supposedly. He'd grown up in Connecticut. His parents were both dead. He had no siblings. He didn't talk about his past. Lorraine had married him 14 months after they started dating, which had struck me as fast, but I hadn't said anything because I'd learned by then to keep my mouth shut about my children's romantic choices. Myrell pulled out her phone right there at the diner. She has connections from her real estate days. She made one call, then another. By the time we'd finished our second cups of coffee, she had the name of a private investigator in Bellevue who owed her a favor. By Thursday of that week, the Pie had a file on Spencer Halleck thick enough to kill a small dog with. Spencer Halleck was not Spencer Halleck. His real name was Sheldon Puckett. He'd been born in Bridgeport, Connecticut in 1983, the son of a plumber, not the heir to anything. He'd done 18 months in a Pennsylvania state prison from 2011 to 2013 for wire fraud. He'd left a trail of bad investments and disappeared women across 3 states. There was a woman in Phoenix in 2017 who loaned him $40,000 and never seen him again. A woman in Albuquerque in 2019 who'd co-signed a loan and then watched him vanish, sticking her with the debt. He had a pattern. Get close to a woman with family money or family connections, marry her or get engaged, drain what he could, and move on. My daughter, with her billionaire brother and her trusting nature and her quiet desperation after the divorce, had been the biggest fish he'd ever caught. I sat in my Rail's living room reading that file with a cold cup of tea in my hand and a feeling building in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not since I'd walked into the bedroom and found my wife crying over a mammogram report she'd been hiding for 16 weeks. "What do you want to do, sweetheart?" my Rail asked. I thought about it for a long time. I could go straight to Brennan, who could go straight to lawyers, who could go straight to the police. We'd press charges. Sheldon would go back to prison. Lorraine would face whatever the courts decided about her role in the wire transfer. The lake house would be liquidated. My son would get his money back. Justice, in the legal sense, would be served. But I kept circling back to something. Lorraine had bought the house and left it empty, had not lived in it, had not rented it out, had not flipped it, had just let it sit there. And the husband, Sheldon, had gone by once or twice to check the gate. Empty houses aren't bought for nothing. My Real's words from breakfast came back to me. Empty houses are bought for one of 2 reasons. I needed to know what was in that house, or what was supposed to be. I called Morel back that night and said I'd like to use my old skills one more time. 2 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, Morel and I went to a hardware store in Auburn where nobody would know us. We bought motion sensors, wireless cameras with night vision, battery-powered speakers that could be triggered remotely, heat sensors, the kind they use in greenhouses, several rolls of black gaffer tape, which I have always loved. The clerk, a kid maybe 19, asked if we were doing a haunted house for Halloween, and my Reel laughed and said yes, the whole 9 yards, and the kid laughed back and asked if we needed any fog machines, and we said no, we had our own. We loaded up my Reel's Volvo and drove east. We parked half a mile from the lake house and walked in through the woods. The neighbor with the leaf blower was nowhere to be seen. The gate was still unlocked. I want to say something here. I'm not proud of what I did next. I broke into a house that, legally speaking, belonged to my daughter. I'm 67 years old, and I had to crawl through a bathroom window on the lakeside because the front door had a smart lock, and my old skills did not extend to bypassing those. My back is going to hurt for a week, I thought, as I pulled myself through. I dropped onto a tile floor in a bathroom bigger than my kitchen. The house was empty in the way that empty houses are. That particular hollow sound footsteps make on bare floors. We worked methodically. I'd been doing this kind of work for 40 years, just in different contexts. I placed motion sensors at key points. The top of the stairs. The hallway leading to what would be the master bedroom, just inside the front door. I hid wireless cameras behind air vents, the kind with the slats angled just right so the lens could see out. But you couldn't see the lens. I set up speakers in the walk-in closets in the basement, hidden behind the false fronts of the recessed lighting fixtures, which I will tell you took me 4 hours and a level of contortion that my hips are never going to forgive me for. The audio I prepared was simple. 2 phrases recorded in my own voice, my real voice, low and even. "Whose house is this? Tell him the truth." That was it. No ghosts, no screaming, no dramatic Halloween nonsense. Just my voice, asking 2 questions that anyone in that house would know didn't belong there. We finished at 1 in the morning. My knees were screaming. Marielle and I sat in her car with the heat running, and she poured me a finger of bourbon from a flask she'd brought, which is one of the reasons I love that woman. "What now?" she asked. "Now," I said. I sent Lorraine a different text. I sent it from the parking lot of an all-night gas station at 2 in the morning. It said, Go to the lake house tomorrow. We need to talk there. Then I drove home and slept for the first time in 5 days. Mariel and I watched the cameras from her living room the next afternoon. Sunday, exactly 7 days after the dinner that had blown my life apart. Lorraine showed up alone at 3 in the afternoon. She used the smart lock code on her phone, came in through the front door, stood in the foyer for a long minute looking at nothing. She was crying before she even got inside, mascara already running. She'd lost weight. Her ponytail was greasy. She walked through the empty rooms like she was at a funeral. I waited until she was in the master bedroom, the one with the view of the lake, the one that should have been mine. Then I triggered the speaker. Whose house is this? She froze. Her whole body went rigid. She turned in a slow circle. Dad? Whose house is this, Lorraine? She sat down on the floor, just folded up right there on the bare hardwood and put her head in her hands. I could see her shoulders shaking on the camera. I let her sit there for 2 full minutes. Then I triggered the second clip. Tell him the truth. She started talking. To the empty room. To the cameras she may or may not have known were there. To her father, who was watching from 40 miles away with tears running down his own face that he was angry about because he'd promised himself he wouldn't cry. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. He was going to hurt me. He's been hurting me. He found out about Brennan's money, and he said if I didn't get him cash, he'd take Maddie. He'd take my baby. He had photos of her at school. Dad, he showed me photos he'd taken from across the street. He said he'd disappear with her and I'd never find her. So I bought the house. He told me to. He said empty houses can be sold or borrowed against, and we'd live off it. But we couldn't move in because then it would be on paper that we lived there and you and Brennan might find us. He said we had to keep up appearances, so I kept living in our house in Renton, and I kept paralegaling, and he kept running up debt, and every time I tried to leave, he'd show me another picture of Maddie and ask if I knew what daycare she was at that week. I'm sitting in Mariel's living room, and I can't breathe. She kept going. I tried to tell you, Dad. I came over in March, do you remember? I came over and I cried and you thought it was about the divorce still. And I let you think that because I was so scared. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt her. And I believed him because I'd seen him hurt me, and I knew Brennan would find out about the house eventually. But I kept thinking I'd figure something out. I'd find a way out. I never did. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm a coward. I'm a thief and a coward, and I don't deserve anything. But I love you. I love you. I'm so sorry. Mariel had her hand over her mouth. I shut off the speakers. I picked up my phone. I called my son. Brennan, I said. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your sister is not the problem. Your sister is being held hostage by her husband, and she has been for over a year. I need you to call your lawyer. I need you to call the police. I need you to do it in that order, and I need you to do it now. By Tuesday, the PI's file had been turned over to the King County Sheriff's Office. By Wednesday, an emergency protective order had been issued for my daughter and my granddaughter. By Thursday, Sheldon Puckett had been arrested at a Starbucks in downtown Bellevue, sitting there ordering a flat white like he was the kind of man who deserved one. They charged him with extortion, identity theft, and wire fraud. The other states he'd left women in started lining up like cars at a drive-thru. Phoenix wanted him. Albuquerque wanted him. Bridgeport, Connecticut, where he'd skipped out on a probation violation in 2014, also wanted him. He's currently sitting in the King County Jail awaiting trial on the local charges, after which he will be extradited to Arizona. The bail was set at $2 million. He does not have $2 million. He does not have anything. The whole Old Connecticut Money Act had been exactly that, an act all the way down. My granddaughter, her name is Madison. She's 8. She came to stay with me the night Sheldon was arrested. Lorraine was a wreck and needed to be with her counselor and her mother-in-law type figures and people who could hold her without it being complicated. So Madison came to my apartment with her purple backpack and her stuffed otter, and we ate spaghetti and watched a movie about a dog, and she fell asleep on my couch with her head on my arm. I sat there until she snored, looking down at the top of her head, and I thought about that man taking pictures of her at school, 8 years old. walking out of school with her little backpack while a man took pictures of her from across the street to use as leverage against her mother. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the kind of justice that would feel right for a man like that. And I let myself think about it. And then I let it go. Because that's what you have to do when you're an old man and you have a granddaughter sleeping on your arm. Now. About the money, about the lake house. It turns out my daughter had not just bought the lake house, she'd done what Sheldon told her to do, which was structure the purchase in a particular way. She'd put $890,000 into the house itself. The remaining $30,000 had been moved into a joint account that Sheldon controlled and had been spending down at a rate of about $2,000 a week. Lorraine had been documenting all of this. She'd kept a notebook, a real, physical paper notebook, hidden in the drop ceiling of her bathroom in Renton, which is where she'd been writing down every transaction, every threat, every photograph he'd shown her, for 14 months. She'd been planning to give it to a lawyer. She'd been getting up the courage. She just hadn't gotten there in time. Brennan and I sat with that notebook in his lawyer's office for 6 hours. The lawyer, a woman named Bethany, read every page and then told my son that his sister was, in her professional opinion, a victim of severe domestic coercion and would not face criminal charges for the wire transfer if Brennan did not press them. Brennan looked at me. He didn't even ask out loud. I just nodded. He looked at the lawyer and said, "We're not pressing anything. We just want the house back, and we want her safe." The house was deeded to Brennan within a month. He sold it for $980,000 because the market had moved a little. He took the original $920,000 back and put the difference, about $60,000 after closing costs, into a college fund for Madison. He didn't tell Lorraine about the fund for 2 months. When he did, at a Sunday dinner I hosted at my apartment, just the 4 of us in Madison. My daughter cried for 45 minutes. Lorraine and Madison live with me now. I cleaned out the spare room and set it up for Madison. Lorraine sleeps on a fold-out couch in what used to be my office. We've been together about 7 months as I'm telling you this. She goes to therapy on Tuesdays and Saturdays. She got a new job, a better one, working as a court advocate for women in domestic violence situations, which she says is the only thing that makes her feel like a real person again. Madison is in 3rd grade and has a best friend named Olivia, and is learning to play the violin. Badly, beautifully, badly. Brennan comes down from Bellevue most Sundays. We have dinner. Lorraine cooks now. Sometimes she still cries at the table over nothing in particular, and we just let her. I don't ask her if she's okay because I know she isn't, but she's becoming. A few weeks ago, I was sitting on my fire escape with a cup of coffee, watching the sun come up over the Walgreens parking lot, and I thought about that lake house. I never set foot inside it during the day. The only time I was ever in there was in the dark, on my knees, hiding speakers in the ceiling and crawling on a hardwood floor that wasn't going to belong to me. It was never going to belong to me. I knew that the first time I drove up the driveway before any of this came out, even if everything had been on the level, even if Lorraine had been planning a Christmas surprise, I would not have moved into that house. 6,000 square feet on a lake by myself at 67, with nothing to do but watch the herons. I would have hated it. What I have now is a 1-bedroom in Tacoma where my granddaughter's coloring books are scattered across the dining table, and my daughter's coffee mug sits next to mine in the morning. What I have is my son driving 60 miles every Sunday because he wants to. What I have is the knowledge that I almost let my anger be the loudest thing in this story, and I'm grateful every day that I called my RL first. I want to say one last thing. I rigged up that house with cameras and motion sensors and speakers because I wanted my daughter to feel cornered. I wanted her to feel watched. I wanted her to feel the way I felt when I sat at my kitchen table with her purse spilled on my floor. I'm not going to pretend I'm proud of that. I'm not going to pretend I had purer motives. I wanted her to suffer, and the only reason that what I did turned into something good is because she told the truth when she was cornered. If she'd lied again, if she'd doubled down, if she'd run, I would have taken every camera out of that house and gone to the police with what I had, and my daughter would be in prison right now, and my granddaughter would be living with strangers. The line between the man I am and the man I almost was is a thin line, and it ran straight through whether or not my daughter could find the courage in an empty house with her father's voice asking her a question to finally tell the truth. She found it. Just barely. Just in time. That's the story. That's the whole thing. I'm going to go now because Madison's calling for me to help her with her homework, and that, it turns out, is the only retirement I ever actually wanted. If this story meant something to you, hit the like button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. The next story is right there in the box on the left when you're ready. Thank you for sitting with me. I've been turning the story over in my head for a while now, and I keep coming back to the same thought. Every door that opened in this mess opened because somebody told the truth, and every door that stayed locked because somebody chose silence. Lorraine bought that lake house because she believed a lie Sheldon told her about what he would do to my granddaughter. She kept that lie alive for 14 months because she was afraid, and the only reason any of us got out the other side was because in an empty room, with her father's voice asking her one simple question, she finally chose to speak. That's it. That's the whole hinge the story turned on. I think about my late wife and the 4 months she hid her diagnosis. I think about my daughter and the years she spent hiding a man's name. I think about myself, 67 years old, hiding cameras in a ceiling because I was too proud to walk up to my own daughter and ask her, plainly, what's wrong? We were all hiding. Every one of us, and every one of us paid for it. That's not karma in any spiritual sense. That's just the simple arithmetic of how secrets work. You carry them alone, they get heavier. You let somebody else pick up the other end, they get lighter. There's no mystery to it. What I learned, late, is that courage isn't the absence of fear. My daughter was terrified the day she sat down on that empty hardwood floor and started talking to a room she thought was empty. She was shaking. You could see it on the camera. But she did it anyway. That's the only kind of courage that ever actually counts. The kind you have to drag out of yourself when every part of you is begging to run. And once she did it, the dominoes started falling the right way. The lawyer. The protective order. Sheldon in handcuffs at a coffee shop. Madison sleeping safe on my couch. If you're listening to this and you're sitting on something heavy, something you've been carrying alone because you're scared of what people will think or what somebody will do, I'm going to tell you what I wish I'd told my wife 30 years ago, and what I almost didn't tell my daughter in time. Pick up the phone, knock on a door, find one person, just one, and put the truth in front of them. You don't have to know what to do next. You don't have to have a plan. You just have to stop carrying it alone. The plan comes after. The plan always comes after. I'm an old man with a 1-bedroom apartment and a granddaughter learning the violin in the next room. I am not wise. I have made every mistake a man can make and a few that I think I invented myself. But I know this much. The truth, told late, still works. It just costs more. Tell it early. Save yourself the years.